Hello, this is Travis Marker and America Francis. We're Steward Growth, and today we're doing a startup toolbox workshop. Um, Today we've decided to explore clients and creating quality clients, as well as maybe the foundation of how you get clients. Did I summarize that correctly, America?
Sure, let's see where it goes.
Let's see where it goes. Um, I think that America had a good idea about the question of how do you filter clients and how do you or how do you help them feel comfortable with you as a provider, a service provider, which definitely is coming up a lot more these days because a lot of people are dealing with Google reviews. One person who's just like the one star out of maybe 1,000 that are positive, um, and it's really hard to overcome these negative reviews on Google or um,
Well, and I think it's hard to get 1,000 reviews. People are getting burned out with all of the surveys they have to fill out. And sometimes it's even with a short one question or three question survey or something, people just don't want to do it.
yeah. Well, and I think also people just have a hard time understanding, what does it mean? Like because sometimes like I myself, like when I'm going to a restaurant, um, I will, if I've never been there before, I will sometimes look at the reviews to see how it's going. I do not look at the 5-star reviews generally because I appreciate that they're just telling me, yeah, yeah, it's good, like that's awesome. But if I look at the negative reviews, I have started to look for the information that is fair. So my having gone to many, many restaurants, because I definitely I'm a restaurateur. I like to do food. I like to do support the local businesses. I don't look at that information from the perspective of saying, yep, they're wrong. This person is clearly right. But I try to actually give the negative reviews a little bit more grace because I'm just trying to see what their experience was like, because sometimes they'll say, the food was great, but the server was horrible, or the food was great, but the manager was horrible, or the food was great, but the place is filthy. And so I'm also looking for the information I want to know about the review, the subtleties of the review, I guess. I'm trying to like parse out the subtleties.
Yeah, I think it's important to appreciate the negative reviews also, because a lot of businesses might be like, we only want good reviews. Don't review us if you're going to give us a bad review. But that information can be really useful so that you can adjust things that are a problem. If you get several reviews that say similar things, you might have a problem that if you fix it will really help. I had an experience one time where I went to a computer place, I got a laptop, there was a problem with the cord, and they just had me buy a new cord and it didn't solve the problem. And so I went to a different location of the same business, and someone called me, a manager person called me and said, "We noticed that you went to a different location. Tell us more about it." And he spent 10 minutes with me on the phone, or maybe longer, talking about my experience and why I changed. And he gave me a new laptop. It was awesome. He did a really good job. But the I was really impressed because when you're engaging with people who are having a problem, sometimes they get upset with you. And engaging with someone that you anticipate might get upset with you seems like a really valuable, like a brave thing to do. It was impressive to me that he would take the time to talk to someone who might be mad. But what good feedback to know if this location isn't providing good service, or the types of problems that would make someone switch. Like, that kind of data is really useful.
That's true. And you also bring up a good point about the fact that he was engaging with you. So like he's watching his data, he's watching his metadata, he's watching his usership data.
I didn't leave a message anywhere. It wasn't like I brought it to anyone's attention. I just went to a different location to see if they could solve my problem better.
But somehow he was following that data. And once he recognized the change in the data, like he was being responsive, which was really great because he's wanting to know what factor happened in the market in essence that caused that shift. And
Hmm.
he engaged. Like, so some people will not, like if you look at the Google reviews, some people will not respond to their clients and they just kind of let it happen. But some people will respond and say, this is, you have to treat it kind of like a Better Business Bureau thing where you're outlining like this is my response to what's happening. But particularly on Google, the people who are defensive about it, that's never good. The idea is to be as collaborative as possible, share
Hmm.
misunderstanding, but at least definitely engage so people can see that you participated because like it says that you're doing it. But obviously, if you can get the in-person contact like what you just had,
Mine was
that's
by
even better.
phone, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, but it's still like it's live contact, right? It's not like just Google review interchange.
right. Right. And you have to be careful with that. Some of that tone stuff can escalate, or if you get someone who's really high conflict and just wants to fight, they can post additional things that are ugly on your site.
Yeah, yeah, you definitely want to be towards de-escalation versus, escalation. Just like, well, how do I'll say my piece as nicely as possible. And
But
now,
identifying the problem is really important. Sometimes something happened and it's difficult to identify what bothered the person.
yeah. And I've done that also where I'll send emails to the stores or like Facebook Messenger or Instagram Messenger.
Feedback.
Yeah, and that way I know I'm not like before I go public with a review because I don't generally like to do negative public reviews. I like
Mhm.
to be able to contact the business and say, hey, this was my experience at your place today. I don't know if you're aware of what happens. I don't know if you're aware that this is going on. Um, I had one interchange with a barbecue restaurant, and I felt like my portion was smaller than a previous time that I went.
Hmm. And which could definitely be the case now. Portion sizes are half the size.
Yeah, so I sent an email just trying to understand like what's going on, like because like I think I spent like $50 on barbecue just meat, so it wasn't like $5. Like I was trying to buy meat for this whole like party at the beach. We were at the beach, and this was the closest restaurant to the beach.
Mm.
And the
Sounds
the
like a
owner
fun
was
party.
the owner was very short with me, very defensive, very and it's like we escalated it. I'm like, wait, why are we escalating? Like I'm the customer, like aren't you trying to help out or whatever? And even in the very end, I was able to ask some additional questions, and they said things like, look, because of where this restaurant is, it was in a kind of a more affluent area. And apparently everybody in that affluent area just beats up on that restaurant because
Okay.
and the restaurant has become defensive because all of their other restaurants were in like kind of boony places like um I think like one's in Kanab, one's in they're
Well,
just
if
really
all of your customers are mad at you all the time, that's really unpleasant.
right. Well, and that was kind of the weird thing is because I'd been in there before, and the guy who helped me before was very pleasant, very enjoyable, very. But this person we were exchanging by email, and the person was super defensive, and it came out that basically he's being attacked by all these rich people near his restaurant, and
Yikes.
but he's also engaging them, and what I thought was really interesting is at no point in our exchange did he offer to do me any service.
He
He
wasn't validating your perspective.
Yeah. Well, even as he started to potentially just hear me out, he still never did anything just to like do me like, people will offer a little coupon or they'll offer like even a little 10% coupon or like any kind of like there
Or
was
what would help you feel better about this whole scenario?
yeah, like the person never actually offered anything to like resolve like I didn't feel like I got value.
Yeah.
And I thought that that was the one thing that I thought was very interesting is that even though this person was spending the time to help me feel heard, there there was a reluctance to actually solve the actual problem because It was just that I misunderstood what was happening and I didn't get taken advantage of whatever. So I thought, huh. So I went back one more time to that restaurant and I tried it out. I got the food and the person who helped me the first time did help me and everything was fine. But it was still this question of like, you
Don't
guys
you
are gonna,
value your customers enough to
yeah,
want them to come back?
yeah, because it was kind of like you guys are gonna die. Like this shop is gonna eventually die. Like I have no idea how you're gonna stay around, but like the fact that you're not engaging with people with the intent to solve their problem, in fact,
I
because
mean,
even
the
if
people
you're
in your area are the ones that will come often. They're the ones you have to figure out why they want to come and how to have a good experience. That's important.
right, well, even on my side, if I get a client who's just a real problem, I don't want their money anymore.
I've heard that. I didn't realize that attorneys dropped clients until fairly recently. And apparently they get a lot of clients that are way too much trouble and they just say, good luck finding another attorney.
Yeah, and even if they owe me money, I'm just like our relationship's over. Like my desire to work with you isn't going to work out. But I also don't do anything to instigate a problem either. Like I don't say like,
You don't provoke your customers.
yeah, I'm still not provoking them to like a tirade or something. I just say, look, I just don't think it's going to fit. Like I'm recognizing I'm not meeting your expectations. I recognize that I'm not providing you the service that you would desire. Um, let's just agree to part ways. I know that you owe me so much money. You don't owe me anymore. And why don't we just work it out? I've also had clients like I
How
had
does
one.
that how does that work? Are they happy about
No, but
you
they also,
erasing those legal bills?
well, I think that they're okay about erasing the bills, but there is actually a vacancy in their process because they feel rejected. Like there's actually a boundary being created, and
Mhm.
I'm identifying that I've reached my boundary. And
People don't like boundaries sometimes.
yeah, they actually don't know how to process that somebody's actually setting a boundary with them and actually holding to the boundary. Like that, I don't,
Especially if they're paying you. They're like,
right.
that doesn't happen very much.
Yeah. So it's like it's not even it has no it,
This
this is not
isn't
about the money at all.
personal, but you have to find a new attorney.
Yeah. I think the one that was really sad though is when you recognize you did a bad job
Yes.
and you're not able to you're not able to solve the problem.
I had one like that, a mediation one time, and I was super upset about it. I won't forget, which is kind of useful as a lesson.
Sure. Yeah, but I think being able to, because I did bring this client in because I knew I had tried to help a family friend and it wasn't exactly in my wheelhouse. And
Yeah.
I have definitely learned now that's my second time where I've tried to help somebody when it wasn't exactly what I did.
Yeah.
And it was really tough to be able to just sit down and own it and say, I was um this is not how it's gonna go. I'm really sorry. Like I've messed up your case. How would you like me to help fix this problem?
Mhm.
And so I do, and and I was
How
willing to.
long term were the consequences of this?
There weren't any. She just understood and she left, and it was she
I mean,
didn't.
it didn't wreck her life.
It was tricky because she was in a position where she didn't have a really great case anyway, and she had wanted to be defensive about the case, and my position was, look, I don't know that I can, like even at the beginning, like I wasn't trying to say she had a winner of the case. I was just trying to help do damage control. But the other attorney had knew the procedures really, really well.
Oh,
And
yes.
so I was out procedured really quickly.
Uh-huh.
And so it cost money. Like she was penalized. And so it was more the fact that we couldn't just walk away and the other side didn't let her just walk away. They actually penalized her. Even as I was, because I knew the other attorney, I'm like, look, I'm just trying to help her out. Like, he's like, sorry, like these are allowed by law. These penalties are allowed by law. And it was hard, but I think the fact that I took the time just to sit and say, look, this isn't something I'm doing. And apparently it's going badly. I can't be the one who's going to help solve your problem because it's also going badly. Like you need to find the help with somebody who knows what's going on. And
But that's what you want when you have a professional, right? You don't want someone to keep
I
going down a path that's terrible. You want them to
exactly,
say, this isn't working. You need another doctor. You need
exactly.
another dentist. You need another plumber. Like,
Right. And I think that that's really important is when you're starting a business and you're bringing clients in, if you say to them, I've never done this before, or I have very little experience in this, at least
I'm,
helps set the experience. Where some people are like, oh no, I'm amazing at this, and they're just trying it out for the first time, and then they're not amazing at it, and then it goes very badly. Because I think you haven't done the small claims. Have you done small claims?
I did some mediation for small claims.
Yeah. So when I do the online dispute resolution program for the court system, a lot of them are small claims contractors.
Mm-hmm.
And quite often you get into the workmanship issue where they're just like, your workmanship sucks. And the person's like, you know, I don't know what to tell you. And the unfortunate thing is when you get to the court system, like your workmanship sucks isn't a legal finding. Like it isn't it's not
You
something the
didn't meet
court.
my expectations. And the court is like, that's a real bummer.
Yeah, because that's not a legal finding. Like you can't say I just don't like it.
You owe
As
me damages because I don't, yeah.
so then the customer's in a bind because they've spent money, the work is performed, and they just don't like it. If the workmanship is incompetent, that's different because sometimes that can be established by somebody else. But
Mm.
um, if you can just work to meet somebody's expectations of the work and maybe spend a little bit more time, it will be better than the bad reviews and better than whatever. But if you just don't know what it is, sometimes I think you do have to pay to have somebody come in and fix it, where that is difficult, but like I've had a case where um the first case I was talking about, so the second case was a lady, I messed up her case. The first one, it was also out of my wheelhouse, and I could tell that people were, it was just not going the right direction. So I found an expert
Mm.
and I said, can you go with these people, like help solve their problem? And I tried to make the transfer as helpful as possible, and it did seem to work, but they were still it because the person was my friend, it ruined our relationship for many years, like a decade.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's
So
a
even
long
though
time.
I know, because like, can you imagine every time you saw somebody who used to be your friend, like they gave you the cold shoulder and the stink eye, you're like,
Oh,
geez. But when
well,
when people lose stuff, it's tough.
and that might make you less willing to help people out because things might go badly.
Yeah. So I think when we also come to when you're starting a practice and you're dealing with clients, I think it's really helpful that you keep your wheelhouse small. Like, I don't think you go as big as possible. I think you try to find ways to understand what you do well, and then you can eventually start branching. So, like when I very first started, my brother-in-law had his law office, and he had a paralegal who was amazing, and she handed me a CD because at that point that's how you stored data. It was on a CD. And she said, here are all the pleadings that you need for a divorce.
Oh my gosh, what a gift.
Yeah, so I understood that in order to do a divorce, I had to make sure all of those pleadings were filled out.
That is amazing.
Yeah, and it was very good. And so then what starts to happen is as you start to actually do simple cases where you just get somebody divorced, plus you start adding education, so like continuing education classes to the thing you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start learning tricks of the trade, you're reading the case law,
Mm-hmm.
then you can start to branch out because your exposure to the law is increasing, as well as your exposure to cases is like the nuances of cases is expanding.
And you
So that's
probably talk to other people in the field.
yeah, yeah. And I'd ask other lawyers like, how would you handle this? You know, how would you handle this person? How would you handle this attorney? How would you handle this scenario? And then it would start to then I could branch, right? But then also like a client would come in and say, hey, I know that you're just starting and I know you kind of do family law, but I got this contract situation.
Mm.
Could you at least look at it? Right. Well, then now you have another thing that's small, but you can still kind of start with that and branch from that also. So now I do lots of contracts. I also it is important to diversify your income. So my brother-in-law also had connection to a public defender contract. And the nice thing about the public defender contract with the county was that it paid you a base minimum amount.
Mm.
So I received some money to go do some work every day.
Nice.
Yeah, it wasn't all the money I needed to solve all my problems, but the fact that I at least had some money coming in that was guaranteed helped, and then I could get more money off the divorces that would come in gradually.
Hmm.
And then that's what I realized. Is so I started to then gather more public defender contracts similar to what I was doing.
Hmm.
So at one point I had quite a few public defender contracts. I think I had 6 public defender contracts at one point. And it was nice because it was guaranteed work. But then I also had um, private clients who would come in gradually,
Is
just,
this after your master's degree?
oh, this is when I opened up my law practice.
And
That's
then
when
you went back to school after that?
no, I had my master's degree when I opened my law practice.
Mm.
But the point was, I guess you just start with you branch and then as you diversify as you have exposure, but you don't immediately fast, quick, just go as big as possible.
Absolutely. Getting clients is a really key piece.
And then keeping them.
And then keeping them. Well, because word of mouth is a huge way to get customers. If you have one happy customer that blasts it out on social media and tells all their friends in the same industry, that can lead to a lot of business.
Yeah. So I think that if you go from the thing that you like doing to getting a client, I think that there's a exercise of faith there.
Yeah.
Because when you do something that you like doing, and then people start to come to you, they'll say, well, how much does this cost me? Well, initially you're like, nothing because we're friends, or
Mhm.
nothing because you're a referral from so and so, or nothing because you're like, I just don't know how to charge money for this.
Mhm.
And if you don't need to charge money, that's okay. I mean, like if it doesn't matter, like so there's definitely a lot of retired people who just they don't want to worry about it and they serve. And there's lots of people who maybe they just recognize the struggle of the other person.
But maybe you get less criticism when you volunteer. Sometimes
Maybe.
it's nice when you're volunteering and you're like, well, I can show up when it's convenient for me and I can give you what I'm doing today. And your negative feedback is not necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're not paying me for it anyway. But I think that at some point you have to say, um, if you need to make money at the thing that you like doing, you have to be able to start with some people and say, would you, what do you think about paying me this for this job?
I
And
was proud of myself the other day. Someone gave me an opportunity to do some work and he gave me a range. And I said, hey, can we start at the top end of the range? And he just agreed to it. And I was like, ooh, that hasn't been a comfortable thing all the time, but that was really nice.
yeah, which is good, right?
I mean, it wasn't a huge like range, but
You're like, why not?
going to the top, when sometimes people just pick the place in the middle or pick the place at the bottom.
So
And then
how
I
did
found
you,
out what he was charging for the work I was doing to the client, and I was like, dang, I should have asked for 3 times that much.
Well, how
Hmm.
did you get to the point that you could feel comfortable asking for money?
Well, part of it is also being a customer. I'm comfortable paying for things that are valuable. So accepting payment for things that I recognize are good value. Like I was an apartment manager for 3.5 years, and I really enjoyed showing apartments because the apartments were in good condition and they were in a really great location. And I felt like I was helping any of the people who got an apartment. It was very win-win. And so when I felt good about my product and my service, then I love helping people get whatever that is, and paying me fairly is part of that and just fine. If I don't feel good about the product or the service, that's where I start feeling like uncomfortable about accepting whatever the payment is because I'm like, ooh, that feels icky.
Did you get any commission or referral fee or anything for showing an apartment?
No,
So,
well, I got pressure to fill everything. So but it was busy. It was a really good location across from a very active hub of great stores and stuff. It was right across from the train station. It was easy to do it. And they were just remodeling everything. So it was all nice. And they just won an award for the outside remodel. So it was easy to feel good about it.
okay. So what, when you had to start working on for yourself privately, how did you get to the point that you could charge money?
I think the early jobs we take help a lot with that. I did a lot of babysitting as a 12-year-old, and recognizing that I could do little odd jobs for people. I did some house cleaning when I was a teenager. I did um, just little jobs like that where people pay you. I think is it helps with that whole process of understanding that there are jobs people don't want to do, and if you do a good job, they'll pay you to do them.
How did you set a price? How
So
did you
how
learn to set a price?
Well, now it's easy. You just look online and see what people are asking on KSL or on Facebook Marketplace or whatever. There are groups that talk about various services and what they charge. I don't think it's as hard anymore, but um, it was basically like what I was willing to work for and whether they were willing to do it. I I undercharge a lot because I like to help people, and I'm a big volunteer person, so it's been kind of hard for me to increase my wages. But um, another thing that helped me was just the realization that I was um, kind of describing my work at a level that wasn't accurate. I was calling it admin. Like, admin is what I was doing in high school working at a temp agency, or I guess I graduated by then, but going in and doing some easy office stuff. And after 20 years of getting really good at a lot of things, I was doing more leadership, administrative, office management, executive assistant. I was doing my skills had gotten a lot better, but I was still describing them in a way that was not going to get me paid well. So I had to really look at my LinkedIn and do some research and talk to some people and learn about how to message what I was doing. And I was lucky because I lived in an area in the Bay Area, and I was exposed to a lot of really high performing people, professionals that had careers. And so learning those things wasn't that difficult for me. I was really interested in reading nonfiction and business literature and kept up with economics and politics and all that stuff. So maybe I was more aware of it than some other people. But framing myself, so that brings us right back to the topic that we started with, is you are the product. Instead of saying I'm a mom, I'm a temp, I said, actually, look at this giant portfolio of work, and I have testimonials, and I have good grades, and I've passed licensing, and I have credentials. And that's an easy way to add credibility, is to go get a license. Go I took the domestic mediation class at the U, and they gave me some kind of icon to put on my LinkedIn. So now it says the U says you took this course, and you can put recognizable symbols, or you can show people things that make you look more credible, because other people are the credentialing as far as like accredited classes and professional training. You can start to build that so that you believe it yourself, right? You're the product. If you don't believe it, they won't believe it. But after you get a certain amount of experience, you can say, I believe it because look how many people have paid me. They want to hire me. I'm doing good work. My projects are good quality. Like I'm competing at the level. I should get paid this. And I just recently started a new job this summer, and my pay rate was 4 times what I was normally working, because that was the going rate, and I was comparable with other people starting in that industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, what do people start at? They start at this? Well, that's more than I normally would get. But another thing that helped me was doing mortgages, because my dad always said, don't work for hourly, work by the project, work by the, don't work. You can only, your hourly is limited. So work by a bigger task, which is something I do with this latest project. But working loans, you make a lot of money. And so when I calculated the hourly on that, like my investment of time versus the compensation, and I know it's worth it. And that's what everybody makes. So sometimes it's just those experiences of, I just got paid that for doing that. And wow, like it was great getting that kind of income.
Uh-huh. So it sounds like you had different processes that you went through to first value yourself, as well as research what does this comparable value mean in the marketplace. So like if someone has this much education or this much experience or this much whatever, what should they be coming in by way of the market's references, the market's values, by way of, if I go to Indeed or whatever, what are they posting this job for?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also the next level of, rather than being paid hourly, um, actually making sure my rate fits the piecemeal rate. Like if I do this project, what should I be paid for? If I do this loan, what should I be paid for?
Yeah, because I like to work part-time and I like a lot of variety. And people who are working full-time salary jobs are making a lot more per hour, and they have benefits and they have a lot of advantages. And I just realized that my level of work was professional, right? I'm working as a professional, as an educated person, and I don't have to work a full-time job to get a higher rate. I just have to charge more per hour. Because when a lot of people that are working part-time jobs, I think this is a big opportunity in the market right now, is all of these super competent people that are working part-time, and the quality of their work is very high, but they're willing to work for less because they don't want to have to commit to 40 hours a week going into an office all their whole life. So just kind of mapping that as, I'm not a temp working like a brand new high school graduate. I am a professional that chooses to work remote and flexible and part-time.
Sure. Yeah, and I think you said reframing is also part of that. The idea of seeing it maybe differently, or seeing it clearly, or seeing it, understanding where you fit in the market.
Also, just it's easy to look in black and white terms, because my role as a mom was really important and prioritized by me. So I kind of was like, well, I can't be a professional career person and be a good mom the way I want to do it. right? Like the professionals want certain things, and I can't do what I want to do while I do those things. But that's not necessarily the case. Now that my circumstances have changed, I can see that I can provide very high quality work part time and meet those expectations and criteria. And also, I can fulfill my other roles and priorities in my life. It's life balance, and we're in a really nice place right now where people can talk about it and they get it.
Yeah, I think that that's one thing that a lot of people, particularly as they start side hustles or whatever, is the life balance management or time balance management, is that when you start to understand what you actually have to do, you realize you can get it done fairly quickly. But you, like if you read the 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss,
That's
he
good.
says most of us are going to work for 40 hours just because we're expected to go to work for 40 hours. We don't actually have to work 40 hours. And even if we think about what we did for 40 hours, it wasn't really very effective, because when we get ready to go on a vacation, all of a sudden we can get 40 hours of work done in one day. And
Well, and some people are really efficient, and I can do a lot in very little time. Maybe it would take someone twice as long to do it. And I think the way we look at the value of people's time and work is really not ideal.
yeah, and particularly if you're working from home, like if you start to diversify your day, so like let's say this is quality kid time between 3 and 4 or 3 and 5, and then you have dinner, and then you got maybe quality kid time for 7 to 8, and they go to bed. Well, you might still have 2 more hours of work from 8 to 10 or from 10 to midnight. Like when I was a workaholic, like I could work all the time. Like it was awesome. Like it didn't help my family. It wasn't, but I
I'm
once I
glad you're
understood.
not a workaholic anymore.
Well, I think that there's actually an addiction to being so busy. Like there's particularly as an entrepreneur type. I realized my time was used fairly efficiently. So like, I mean, I'm not sitting around the water cooler just talking generally, because I know I'm trying to get things done. And so I really liked working as an entrepreneur from the beginning, startups say it, because all of it was investing in the crop. Like all of it's investing into the ground. All of it's investing into the potential return on investment, right? So, and then as soon as it starts converting, then it's even more addicting, because you actually can see that the product is working. You can see that the thing's happening.
I want to bring up for a second um, having other people work for you. We've talked a little bit about virtual assistants, and I was talking to somebody this morning about how efficiently he works when he has a detail oriented person working with him. And I know paralegals are really important to attorneys. Sometimes getting that kind of someone who can compensate for whatever your weak areas are, or somebody who can handle all of the admin stuff if you're a big level thinker, that can add a lot of value to the work you do if you get the right team.
Yeah, well, definitely the best thing you can do is start to automate your practice as much as possible. Automate
Oh
your office,
yeah.
automate your, like if you are required to be present for everything that you do, then you've not made your practice very efficient.
Yeah,
So
you want to get paid while you're sleeping.
right. And if you're sharing money with employees or with partners or collaborative people or contractors or subcontractors, that's totally fine. That usually means you're still making money. But sometimes people are like, if you think that you have to be the only thing making money, then you're in your way.
Yeah.
So
It can be really difficult to delegate and release some of those tasks.
absolutely. Well, and I know that I mean, one attorney, we started basically at the same time. He has 2 or 3 attorneys underneath him and 10 paralegals, including just office staff. And I'm really excited for him, because it that means that he's definitely growing his business and whatever. I also appreciate that that does also represent a lot of overhead, a lot of expenses, a lot of benefits, a lot of obligations that have to be kind of carried and weighed. And I think that I recognize I haven't done that. I haven't created a similar model because I just don't want it. And so my model is often like how do I create more efficient methods that don't require overhead or
Mhm.
I mean like structural overhead or physical maintenance overhead because I think my paralegal has worked with me since maybe 2013 or 12, maybe left 13. And she's worked from her house because her primary goal was to be a mom. And so as long as she got the work done, I didn't care when it got done, right? Like as long as and then she could go to daycare and she could go to like she's been involved in like I think the PTA, she's been involved in different mother-daughter things. And I also didn't have to pay full time. I didn't have to pay benefits. I didn't have to pay a lot of her taxes because she was just a
Mm.
1099, so she could work on her own. So I think that when we think outside the box of like, what do I want to carry? What makes my life like what meets my needs? I've
Mhm.
also very rarely paid her even 40 hours in a month because it doesn't work out. Like it that's just as she's billing me for what she's doing, it doesn't work out to be that, you know. It doesn't mean that um she gets what she wants. I mean, which I think because she has a husband and he has a pretty decent sized business and stuff. So I think she's mainly looking for something to do, probably some spending money,
Mhm.
but really it's more just like some value and something to do, right? So we've been able to kind of like make everything happen. But if
Yeah.
you but even as we've been growing like steward growth and as we've been growing other things, it's still similar in nature to what do the people coming to the table want to do and how do we meet their need versus how do we just maybe solve a financial problem.
Yeah, and I know I've talked to you before about what color is your parachute. Did you finish that? Did you get into that?
I haven't finished it, but I did get I think I mean I got to some assessment section, but I haven't finished it.
Because sometimes we get to know ourselves, but then if you're in a supervisory role, sometimes you're the one identifying the skills and um, abilities of the people that work with you, and you're able to help them identify, give all of this work to this person. It's easy for them and they do a good job. Um, I know recruiters and people who hire need to know a lot of those different skills, like what is needed for this role, right? What kind of work, what kind of project is it? Some people are not going to be good fits for working on this thing.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I know that in the interview process, I've had to over, the last 20 years start to ask better questions when people are coming in because I need to know how goal directed they are or how what I'll even ask questions like what's your ideal workday like, but once they're in, sometimes I have to do another interview where I'm saying, it doesn't seem like we have made this fit. Like this doesn't exactly work the way I anticipated. Um, what would make this more efficient for you? Because I would like it to be easier for this to happen. Or and I think you have to be able to go back and say, what's wrong with what's happening. Just like with your customers, you have to say, how could I have improved the experience? Some of it's also with the employee. And then,
I did that not too long ago where I had a job and it wasn't working for me and I ended up leaving. And that was one of the first times I'd ever done that. And I was really proud of myself. I've been reading some books like Necessary Endings, and um, sometimes it's better to just stop. You can try lots of things and you can work and you can hit your head against the wall, and sometimes it just isn't the right fit. It's okay.
yeah, I totally agree. So, how do when you think about boundaries, like I was just talking with my daughter the other day about when I first had opened my practice, we did not have cell phones. I mean, I think they may have just been coming out, like they might, I mean, which is actually kind of weird because she said something like cell phones became pretty popular in like 2006, I guess. And I thought, is that true? Like, it's only that long ago that we didn't have cell phones that were like
Wasn't
everywhere.
life different before?
Yeah, like that's so,
How?
yeah. So I was thinking, when I left the office before I left the office, like you didn't take your phone home, you didn't answer messages while you're away, you didn't, nobody, you didn't give people your personal phone number at the house. You know, like if people called
And
you
you
from,
had a house phone.
yeah, you had a house phone, like you had a landline. And I told my daughter, I said, it's okay to still create similar boundaries, you know, like with customers, with clients, with employees, like it's okay to still, you know, figure out ways to communicate the boundaries that would help you be healthy. Because you're talking about,
I
you
may
know,
not answer until it's been a full business day.
but even still, like I've gotten to the point that, you know, you have so many different people who call you generally. If they're not in my phone, I screen them just like that. I just automatically screen them because
You can leave
uh,
a
I,
message if I don't have it.
yeah. And then my message says, don't leave a message. Like if you can't text me, then I'm not calling you because it's just a way to create those boundaries, right? That allow people to say, my time is important. My like the things I'm doing are important. The stress I'm managing is already enough. It's already been committed to. So if you want my attention, I appreciate if you play by the rules of texting me. Then I'll call you back, or I'll call you as soon as I'm available. Or,
Or I'll never call you.
but I remember initially, like, yeah, I'd come back from the office, you know, to the office, and I had a legal pad of paper, and you know, you might take 25 calls down, and then I'm just sitting there answering calls, and it wasn't that that was
You
bad,
didn't
but
have a paralegal doing that?
not when I first started.
Oh.
Yeah, like when I very first started, I learned how to do all my pleadings. I learned how to do, you know, I learned how to do the phone calls. I don't think I had a paralegal for a long time, just because I like to make
Or a
things more efficient.
receptionist, right?
Yeah, I think I think with me and a couple other law firms, we eventually got a receptionist, but I I also learned that I could do the pleadings really fast myself a lot of times. So it didn't
Well,
automatically
if you use
equate.
a template,
Yeah, when you have a template, it was pretty fast. So it wasn't like I was in jeopardy. I just learned how to manage it. But anyway, it was good. But I think you do have to learn how to adjust to technology and adjust to the times and be willing to set the boundaries that will allow you to say, uh, this isn't happening right now.
I think we could definitely spend an entire hour talking about keeping up with the newest, latest, innovative things. Some things are important to keep up with, some are less important to keep up with, but it's easy to get left behind right now.
Yeah. Well, I also think going maybe a little backwards to what you're saying about just the time with your daughter and priorities, I think that we should also spend more time keeping our balance versus learning how to innovate and whatever, you know, like I think it's okay sometimes to go slower and to,
Go outside, take a walk.
yeah, like budget in less. Like, cause I mean, I've said with kind of surprise that since 2016, I've never made less money. And I also work less. So that it tells me that there's a lot of kind of golden space inside what I already do for more efficiency. Because
Mhm.
as I find that efficiency, as I find the way to scale things differently, as I find ways to use my time more efficiently, it forces my kind of intuitive process to say, if that's important to you, how are you going to fit in these other things that are also important?
That 4-hour work week book is really useful. Even if you don't go down to 4 hours, if you can cut out any hours, it gives you some flexibility.
Well, yeah, particularly if you're still being as just as efficient. But I know that like just with you and your daughter, like I coached my kids in soccer. I coached my kids, you know, in other things. I did scout stuff with my son. Like even now, like my girls wanted to, you know, build, you know, a fort yesterday afternoon.
Mhm.
I just think that it's okay to say, um, these other things can take priority to an extent if I'm making other things fit where they need to fit. Like if I'm being efficient, if I'm being focused, if I'm taking care of clients, or if I'm setting boundaries with clients so they understand when it's going to get done. If I'm setting boundaries with work, saying this is when it's going to get done.
Mhm.
But I think that you just have to pay attention to it.
Sometimes that's the hard part. Some of those executive functioning things of people can do work, but they're not exactly sure when they set up their own business, how to structure their work day, how to put important things on their agenda, how to accomplish things that are difficult to do. Maybe reaching out to clients or, cold calling or whatever, handling bills and taxes, things they don't want to do. Sometimes making themselves do those have tos can be a real impediment to someone trying to start something on their own.
Right. Well, I think also working from not working from scarcity.
Mm,
Because I have one guy that I work with who never takes holidays. Like he never has days off. Like he works every day because he's just there's this fear that like if he doesn't work every day, like he's just not going to make it. Where I think if
yeah.
you are working from a place of abundance, meaning that like there will be money, there will be work, there will be this, and also I'm going to take a holiday. Even if you don't go anywhere, sometimes just saying like I'm going to sleep in today, which is not
People do
necessarily
better work when they rest.
right, which I mean may not always be possible with like work employees, but I think if you're starting your own practice, I think it's okay to have routines that um fit and help you um balance things out. My wife calls this uh self-care behavior, or because I was using the word routines, but sometimes she was getting a little confused based upon what I was trying to imply. Why routines? Because routines can be a little bit ambiguous, but it's actually just self-care behavior.
Yeah.
So if you have regular self-care behavior that says I'm going to go do the following things, and you make those things a priority, it causes you to release your brain from that the scarcity of if I don't get this done today, it just will never ever get done. Well, if you think about the seven habits of highly effective people, that means that that person is always in urgent and need, like the worst category, the urgent and necessary or something.
Yeah.
Where if you can keep your quadrants fairly relaxed and just you're paying attention to them,
I think
then
it's important.
yeah, it doesn't mean that there aren't times when you're not in crisis, but if you're always living in crisis, then that means you're not managing.
Yeah, that self-care, it's so important.
Yeah.
So,
So I guess if we're summarizing today's topic, we initially started off with kind of clients, client management, client reviews, and then we transitioned to value, establishing ideal value by way of like you just seeing yourself inside the marketplace and seeing where you're at.
if you
I also
provide good value, your clients will come to you. They,
absolutely, and
they
then
will say, "Take my money."
yes, I also like that we got to the idea of being efficient in time management because I really, for me, that's been super critical. And I actually love the idea of saying, how could I do more with less? And how do
Reduce
I,
and simplify.
yeah,
One idea we didn't explore very much that I think is valuable is if you're at the beginning of your career or if you're at a place where you're looking at new options, if you can craft your job around you, um, that what color of your parachute book is really useful. Maybe what you do is focus on education or skills that will give you the flexibility to have part-time work or gig work or remote work. Some of those things you can anticipate that you want a more flexible job and work backward and find some skills that people are willing to pay for that fit those employment needs. So you're talking about if you work at a desk in an office 40 hours a week, that's not as flexible. And what types of skills will people pay for on a more flexible basis?
absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I also, as I was thinking about gigs and side hustles, like if you look on Instagram, you'll see, memes and reels or whatever that'll say like 50 side hustle jobs. And I look at those and I'm like, oh, they are in fact side hustle jobs, or gigs, side gigs. But oftentimes they just don't seem symbiotic to me. Like I wouldn't do most of them. And I think the difference when we're looking at ourselves it is trying to find stuff that you would actually do as a job, you know, like that you would actually want to do as a side hustle, you know, like that would be more natural to you.
Well, I will say that the reason I got my loan job, which is a really great gig, is because I was paying attention. When I bought my house, my loan officer just made a comment. She was a young mom. She had a baby. She said, my husband's in medical school and I'm staying at home and I'm paying for all of our, our rent, our expenses, our big money needs with this at home flexible job. And my antenna just went up and I was like, oh, tell me all about that. Like, I want to do a job like that where I can stay home and do kids and pay big bills. Like, tell me, what is that job even? What is that job? Because a lot of people don't know what loan originators do. And the training for the loan origination was not difficult for me. I already had real estate experience, and the the training was like a 40-hour class. It was negligible, right? It wasn't expensive to do it. My first loan paid for all of my training costs. And sometimes it's just looking for opportunities and saying, what is out there? And then following up. I had to go talk to her employer. We did a lunch meeting. I signed up for the training. I took the tests. I had to do that follow up. But once I finished it, even though I wasn't working full time, any loans I get are a big, big bonus.
There you go. So because you were paying attention, you heard the opportunity. It kind of it spoke to you.
She was young. She was a mom. She was paying all these bills. And I was like, wow, that sounds like a really good job.
That's awesome.
And she did have some advantages, I will say, because her mom was also an originator. So her mom was passing along a lot of work to her. And you can't just pop into the industry sometimes and get loans. Like, you have to get some experience. You have to talk to people about loans. Sometimes there are some industry downturns. So there are lots of elements to it, but paying attention is really useful. If people say, hey, you're really good at this thing, sometimes people are good at home decorating or cooking or something, and those are things that they can do from home, and people would love to pay for their homemade caramels or whatever. You'd be surprised at what people will pay high prices for that some people just do easily.
Totally agree. I think this has been an awesome session, and you know, it's always fun to do these. I'm grateful for the things that we explore.
Thank you so much, Travis.
Yeah, I think that it's fun. I think we have a good time uh, in our dialogue. I hope that this has also been good for those of you who tune into YouTube or other places. This is a live session, so if anybody ever wants to join us, you can check at stewardgrowth.com for our schedule. You can also watch these again on YouTube. If you type in YouTube at Steward Growth or Steward Growth, you will find us. So we always enjoy these and hope you have a great month.